Planning a fishing trip shouldn't feel like a full-time job. With fishingbooker.com, you can find and book the perfect fishing trip within minutes. Fishingbooker.com connects you with trusted fishing captains around the world. Booking is fast, easy, and secure, with access to verified customer reviews, loyalty rewards, and around-the-clock customer support. Everything you need to book with confidence is in one place. So head to fishingbooker.com and start planning your next fishing adventure today.
If you're a serious hunter and you haven't tried Hex yet, this is the edge you're missing. Hunters have always talked about animals having a sixth sense, feeling you before they ever see you. Hex works by completely blocking your body's natural energy, helping you get closer without tipping them off. Most hunters don't believe it at first, until they hunt in it. And once they do, it makes them believers fast. Go to hexhunting.com, that's HECS hunting.com, and use code WAYPOINT to save $20 on a full Hex system.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast, brought to you by Huntworth. Huntworth gear for all types of weather, all types of terrain, all types of budgets. It's clothing that just works. Check them out at huntworthgear.com. And right now, through March 29th, they've got that 25% off sale, everything on the site. So check them out, huntworthgear.com. This week's podcast, I think you guys are going to really enjoy it. For a couple reasons. One, if you're a knife nerd, it's a fun podcast because we go a little bit into depth on some of the blade shapes, blade geometry, steel. If you don't know anything about knives and you're just like, I'll just go pick one up, this one is a little bit more in depth, and there's a little bit of education as far as like why all the things I just mentioned are important. But this company, so I feel like if you're listening to this podcast, you've certainly heard of Montana Knife Company. You've looked at it and you've said, oh man, these are $300 knives. Like, you know, what do I need a $300 knife for? And I will admit to you, like prior to doing this podcast or like figuring out that I was going to do this podcast, I would have said the same thing. And I talk about it in the podcast, certainly, that I thought that this was just another marketing thing where there is many examples of put out a limited run of something, create a buzz about it, it gets scooped up, that scarcity mindset. So as soon as the next one drops, boom, that one gets scooped up, and so on and so on. And that does happen, especially in the knife world, if you are kind of like a knife nerd. Happens a lot because handle materials, liners, all that sort of stuff, you know, people really will see one, and because of certain grains, because of patterns, steels, they want one specific one or a certain look. But it certainly seemed with all of the hype that was the case. And looking into it, Josh Smith is absolutely legit. I say it on the podcast, but go to Arizona Custom Knives, type in Josh Smith, and look at these knives that he made. And he talks about what it takes to become a Master Bladesmith, and he was the youngest one and probably still is the youngest one who got to the Master Bladesmith ranks. But the stuff that you see on Forged in the Fire, those things that I always thought was like, why are they doing this, like chopping wood, rope, and all sorts of other crap, where it seems like kind of comical. That's what they have to do, and he explains like what it takes to get there and all that stuff. But so the CEO, Josh Smith, of this company is an actual Master Bladesmith knife maker. And then to go on to continue to make these knives, and kind of we go down that path in talking about going from making, you know, a $10,000 or a $40,000 sword, $10,000 knives, $40,000 sword, to $300 knives in the custom knife world or in the knife world. a $300 knife isn't that much. And you could look at, a lot of the folders out there. You can look at any kind of like quote unquote name brand folder. And $200-300 isn't expensive in the least bit. And those same companies that are making those have a $200-300 fixed blade that goes right along with it. It's just we're not used to kind of seeing that. But circling back around, it seemed to me that this just was marketing. It was just hype. It was just put it out there. It was like a cash grab, and to go into his story, to go into the origin story of the company, what the company's doing, all of that sort of thing is really cool. And that's what we talk about on this podcast. And, the companies that we're dealing with, like Latitude is, right here in Michigan, Genesis 3D right here in Michigan. Some of this stuff, Zinger, Canati, these guys are in Michigan. These guys are, bringing, industry or whatever to, our home state. This is what he's doing in Montana. And just really cool to have someone who's actually capable of making all of this stuff behind the brand. And that's the story that we're telling here, or allowing him to tell. And super fun podcast, at least for me. You guys probably got that from just listening to me talk here. But I think you're going to enjoy it. It's very interesting, and it definitely kind of changed my mind on what this company is all about. Like I said, I thought it was just a Yeti-style marketing mogul, and just isn't necessarily the case. So listen for yourself. Let me know what you think. As always, thanks for listening. Enjoy. All right, everybody. Adam back with another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. Got Nate in here with me today. And we're talking with Mr. Josh Smith from Montana Knife Company to kind of tell a little bit of the story, getting into the whitetail world of things. You may have heard of Montana Knives. I think you can't have not heard of the brand. But I even for me, knowing about the knives, seeing them at all the tacks, if you've been to any of the tacks, you've definitely got to put your hands on these knives. But the story behind them is just incredible, and I think that's really been missed. So I really want to dive a little bit deeper into that. And for us whitetail guys, I think it's an amazing, craftsman, hardworking story that I really think has not been told, at least on our side. So how are you doing today, Josh?
Good. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So, with that, real quickly, I listened to a bunch of the other podcasts that you were on, and, piecing them all together, hours and hours and hours. You small, really, really hardworking family, and you end up making your first knife at 11 years old. And now today we want to keep, maybe not in our world, but we want to keep, guns out of kids' hands. We don't want them to have knives. We don't want them to have anything. So at that time, what was it like making knives at 11 and deciding that was going to be the next, your passion, lifelong passion?
Yeah. I mean, my Little League baseball coach was an outfitter, and he would bring knives to practice and show the dads, at baseball practice. And he was making hunting knives at that time. And he invited me to a shop to make one. And I think being just an 11-year-old boy in Montana, like, I don't know how you're not interested in guns at that age, because I just thought it was all the coolest stuff ever, And so when I actually been made as a little kid, something struck me of like, you can craft and actually make hands something so cool as a knife. And then at my second and third, sold them, and I was like, wait, I'm at that point 12 years old, and I can make money making knives. It just seemed amazing to me. And so the hobby kind of turned into a real passion. And the other part of that, old is when I really started bow hunting for whitetail. We had 13 acres, but we were kind of backed up against the Blackfoot River bottom. So I could go walk out from our property and go bow hunt, for miles in the river bottom. And the idea of making your own hunting knife, like killing, it took me a couple years with my bow I think I was 14 when I finally killed a deer with my bow. That was back when bows, I was lobbing, big, thick aluminum arrows at deer and, with probably 40 pounds of, 40. It took me a while to actually get one, but I think the combination of hands, making knives, also being able to use what you make, deer that you, and I was, at the same time working in my parents' excavation business, running backhoe and excavators, and I had the mowing business. And, my dad's the hardest working guy I've ever known. So just hard work was kind of what was modeled to me. And I didn't really look at any of it like work. Running backhoes it was fun. I enjoyed mowing lawns. So that's kind of how I got started with it.
Can you imagine rolling into soccer practice or football practice? I do a lot of coaching too. My son's 10 years. He just turned 10. But I can't imagine being like, hey, dads, come check this out. You know what I mean? And just roll out my array of hunting knives or whatever that may be. That's why if I ever moved anywhere, Montana would have to be one of the top the top places to go. But that's kind of cool to do that. And I can relate to some of the, working construction and doing those things. So for you, like seasonal stuff, were you kind of like, was your dad one of those guys that, hey, we have a busy time of year, but we're always going to be doing something. So your guys are kind of always like, you saw the diversity, I guess, in your family growing up.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard to make much for knives in the summer because in Montana, especially in the excavation world, and I'd say a little less so where I live here in Missoula, it's a more mild. I mean, we shut down November 1st, basically completely. If we're lucky, we'll make it to the November 15th, and the ground freezes, and then we don't really move a muscle in the excavation business until essentially April 1st. And so, especially once I got out of school, by then, by 1st of June, my dad was in, full go mode 7 days a week. And it was my job every night he came home to grease the back. When I was young, it was kind of like maintenance stuff, grease, change oil. My mom was always adamant about like making sure my dad's windows were washed in the trucks and the backhoes, and he shouldn't be having to do a hard day of work. And so cleaning the backhoe out, all that stuff, helping him load pipe. It's a drain field or something. And then, come the end of school, I was working all summer, and I really got to the point by the time I was a freshman in high school, I was running, a lot of our own jobs. My dad would give me jobs that I could do on my own, and I was taking a dump truck and a backhoe one way and he was taking one another way. And by the time I graduated, I had an employee working for me, so yeah, summer wasn't a time for making knives.
Yeah.
But in the winter and after school, I was out there a lot, get much for weekends off in the summer. That's the biggest regret. Like we didn't fish much. We didn't go do much. Summer was, you had to get to November and then survive paying all the equipment payments and insurance and everything until April. So summer was for putting money in the bank.
So I want to just kind of go back a little bit. So going through your story, at 11, you start selling these knives. And then I think it was like 12 years old, you apply to be a journeyman or apprentice bladesmith. That is not something I think that many people even know exists even today. So how did that come on your radar to make that a profession or to go in that path?
Yeah, it's a good question. That comes with that mentorship. At 12 years old, I think I was 12. I actually found the certificate the other day. I need to do the math. I was 12 or I think it was 12 or 13, but I'm pretty sure it was 12. I joined the American Bladesmith Society. You know, Rick came to me and he was like, hey, you should organization, and if you stick with it in a couple of years, you'll be eligible to test for your journeyman test. And so I joined, and it's a bladesmithing organization. Essentially, you just pay your dues, and then at that point, you're considered a knife maker. Fully informal. It's on your own. Like back then, it was pre-internet. Pretty much assumed you just had to go to a guy's shop and learn how to make knives if you were going to get good. And so I was an apprentice for a couple of years, and then in 1996, I tested for the Journeyman Smith rating. By that point, I had been going to some knife shows and exposed to a lot of other knife makers. I'd seen guys take their journeyman tests. By the time I was 14, I was like, that I want to be and what that consists of, you have to do the first test in a Master Bladesmith shop, performance test, so that you have to forge a blade that has to be able to chop open half in one chop, which just shows sharpness. Chop 2 2x4s in half without resharpening, and they'll inspect the edge, make sure that it hasn't dimpled or chipped or any of that stuff. And then you have to shave hair off of your arm. Again, a rope and 2 2x sharpening, and it still has to be shaving sharp. And you have to bend that blade 90 degrees in the vise without breaking it. And that shows you have control over your heat treat process, steel selection, edge grinding, sharpening, the whole kind of package for what makes a working knife. Once you pass that, I did that in Eugene, Oregon, in Wayne Goddard's shop. He passed away, legend knife maker. Once I passed that in Oregon, I flew to the Atlanta show in June. I had turned 15 by that point, and you put knives to a panel of judges, and they judge the fit and finish of the knife. Basically how they look, how well they're constructed. If you have a bunch of gaps and cracks and handles, or stuff like that. And so I passed that at 15 years old, and was the youngest to do that ever. And then you can be 2 years. You have to be a journeyman at least 2 years before they let you test for Master Smith. I waited just because of what we were talking between my parents' excavation company, school sports, and all that. I didn't get good enough fast enough to test in 2 years. I tested my freshman year at college. I was 19 for the Master Smith, which is the highest rating. And you have to do the same test, but with a Damascus steel blade to do the rope and the 2x4s and all that. 300 layer Damascus blade. And then you have to present 5 knives to that panel of judges again in Atlanta. But this time you have to have this really difficult to make Quillian dagger as a part of those 5. And then your of knives has to be top level. Like if they find things wrong, they're going to fail you. And so I took that test in the year 2000 when I was 19 and passed that, and I was the youngest. And I think there were about 85 in the world then. Now there's probably 150.
Wow.
So just for completeness sake, because as we were waiting for you to hop on here, we were talking about the Damascus, and Nate said, well, that's the shape of the blade or whatever. He knows that there's these Damascus knife makers that want to be friends with him on Facebook. And I said, no, that's the stacked metal, and this is how they have to do it, and blah, blah, blah. So can you explain like that process?
Kraft Mac and Cheese is better than 90s hip hop. We'll remind you of your childhood without making you feel incredibly old. Kraft Mac and Cheese. Best thing ever.
And what Damascus is, and why these Damascus knife makers want to be our friends.
Yeah.
From other countries.
I actually just was forging Damascus on Monday. We were shooting some stuff in my shop, and you take layers and layers of steel, and it's usually at least 2 different alloys. If you stack up all the same steel and you forge weld it into a block, it's going to all steel, right? And so you won't see a pattern. But if you I equate it to like red and yellow Play-Doh. If they were to not combine, if you just were to alternate layers of that and you press that all down into this big long bar, at the end of it off, you would see those layers in the end of the bar. Well, that's what it is with steel. You have like a carbon steel layer, a nickel layer, and you heat that. I stack those pieces up, and I just weld the ends up, weld a rebar handle on it. I heat that in my forge to about 2,400, and that steel will forge weld to itself at around 2,250, 2,300 degrees, and all the pieces become a solid block. And so if I was to chop saw the end off, it would look like just a solid block of steel, all these layers of steel within that when you etch it. From there, you can manipulate those layers to make patterns. And you make Damascus, there's, patterning Damascus, where whatever you press or whatever you do to that steel, it affects those layers and the way that they move within that bar. I just brought this in this morning. I'm setting up my new office. You can kind of see the layers maybe on this camera if people are actually watching this and not just listening. That's a push dagger that I made some years ago. And you can see the layers on those blades, and that's a twisted Damascus blade. And so that's an example of those layers are just, but then I manipulate them to make a pattern. Really what that was for was, in the old days, let's add pieces of steel that are kind of thin and narrow, but I need to make something for my farm implement that's thicker and maybe longer. Well, I have to take I could stack all those up, forge weld them into a bigger block of steel, and then I can forge out to the shape, because back then they weren't going to just grind and cut things and throw stuff away. Like, you didn't live in a society in the, late 1800s. You used every bit of what you had. And so if you needed to make a brace for your wheel on your wagon or a farm implement, you would use that Damascus steel kind of in a way to actually make what you have work.
Interesting. So how many did you say there's 300 layers in one of those knives, or one of those blocks? I mean,
yeah, and that's really not even that many. I mean, yeah, you can have, depending on how you stack it up, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands in different directions.
Wow. Yeah, like those are the things I was not educated on, right? I am not that guy that I knew, flea market knives growing up. You go into flea market, you see these stuff. I'm like, I don't really care. I never was really drawn to that, other than just a knife to gut deer with and, do that kind of thing. So talking before that, I'm like, all right, I need a little 101 here, because I know not all knives are created equal. And then starting to hear about this forging stuff and like all the background, like, man, this guy was on it at a young age. I can't imagine my kid at 11 years old, 12 years old being like, I want to go do this and like learn how to be really good at making knives. I mean, that's pretty cool. And that's just a byproduct of the environment you were in as a kid, seeing a dad working really hard and those things. So I can't.
And I will add to that, even with what you're doing right now. You just mentioned I did it too with all my kids. I coached all their youth sports and was super involved in kind of what dads, I think, should do when their kids are 10 years old. But, my dad did the excavation thing. He modeled hard work, but he didn't teach me to make knives. I don't want to gloss over how impactful a coach like yourself, and let's say this bow hunting, stuff that we all do, like with yourself, you're an expert in your bow and archery and whatnot, and you've got a little boy at practice that's your son's buddy, and he's asking you 100 questions about bow hunting.
Yeah.
And if you invite that kid over and, maybe you have a son has a bow, you invite him over, you show him how to shoot a bow, and you show him a little bit about arrow setups and just a few things, right? And here's how you set up a blind on the ground. And you don't have any idea how impactful that could be to that kid. And the fact that Rick, who took the time to invite me as a kid for whatever reason up to his shop and take the time to actually mentor and teach me this, because he had no reason to do it. And if anything, he was kind of a gruff, like, scary guy. But he actually was a giant teddy bear. We were all just scared of him as our coach. With your beard, they're probably scared of you too. But, he was this outfitter and this guy that just took him out of his day to teach this kid. And little did he know that would turn into what we're doing today with 110 employees, right? Like, he had no idea what that was going to turn into. But mentorship, there's so many young boys out there that don't have fathers, or maybe they do have dads and their dads just don't do what they're interested in. You know, maybe it's a white collar dad that's a great dad, but that guy maybe just provides the opportunity for his kid like my dad did. He said, well, there's a corner in my shop. You can start setting up your knife making stuff in the shop. And then my dad eventually closed in a lean-to, kicked me out of his shop because I was making too much of a mess. But my parents didn't hold me back, right? They were like, yeah, that's great. If you want to make knives. I mean, and I many times I almost burned my shop down with a hot pan of oil, heat treating knives and starting it on fire and all the things I was doing, but I wasn't into drugs. I was doing that, right? And that mentorship, I think guys need to recognize that, like that little boy at practice or whatever that's asking you 100 questions, like if you bring him over, you know, 20 years old, be the big bow hunter in the world with the giant, you'd all kicked off because you invited him over for practice to learn how to shoot a bow.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So the story goes, you know, you get this Master Bladesmith thing, but you start making custom knives, but you created the name Montana Knife Company well before that, and you kept talking about it and kept talking about it. And as we were talking about a little bit before the podcast, the custom knife making world seems to be maybe kind of boom or bust. They have to be really super high end knives, and they have to be perfect. And one little mistake, and you have to start over. The going from custom knife making, and I would encourage everybody, they're still out there. I think the easiest way to find one to see like what Josh used to make is to go to Arizona Custom Knives and type in Josh Smith in the search bar, and you can see that it is not at all what I expected. You know, you see these Montana Knife Company knives and you're thinking hunting knives and things, and it's walrus tusk, wild Damascus stuff. There are some hunting knives I do like, the Drop Point Hunter. I'm surprised that we don't see that shape here in the Montana Knife Company. But you see these knives, and then you see the Montana Knife Company knives. So that transition for a guy that, you know, works at such a high level to go, some would say, and maybe your custom knife buddies are like saying you're going to like a rudimentary style knife. Like, how is that for you to digest?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Both forms of business have their difficulties and even struggles in my own mind, right? So when I was a custom knife maker, my whole goal after graduating high school, got married, it was to become in the country. Like I was chasing the mentors that were those mentors were all over the country. I was going to knife shows and asking them questions and soaking up information. And I was getting to a pretty high level in the nation as far as a custom knife maker. But I had 4 young kids, and I'll be honest, like it's a starving artist situation. You know, yeah, I was making knives that were $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. I made $40,000. Like I was doing really high end stuff. But what people don't understand, it's like being a bronze artist or maybe a painter or whatever. You can go to a show and sell $15,000 worth of a product and come home with all that money in your pocket. And when you're out with your young kids, that's a lot of money. Kind of pay all your bills, and then you have to start working again for the show for months with no income, and it's just like this roller coaster up and down. And you know, for some of these rich guys that are buying expensive knives, like they'll be slow to pay, or maybe they'll change their mind. Like you start this big order and then they're like, you know, the stock market's going down a little bit, and like I think I'm just gonna wait. And it's like, well, shit, man, through this knife, like there's just difficulties with that artist deal, and people also don't understand why a knife is $2,000 or $3,000. You know, so it's hard to find new customers that actually understand what you're doing enough to want to give you money. And I look at it like it's another art form. Some people collect high-end paintings, other people collect high-end knives. And when you start to learn and see the forging process, everything that goes into a knife, then people start to become sold. That's why we would invite our collectors out to our shops and teach them, is that most likely they weren't going to be able to do it, but they respected it and they wanted to buy it. But here's the thing that I was struggling with. People were asking me, like, I want to buy a knife for my son for his 12th birthday for hunting season. And it's like, man, I need like $800 to make that hunting knife to even make any money. And I felt bad charging those kind of prices to friends. So I'd make knives for cheap. And I also was really kind of struggling a little bit with like making these really high-end push daggers like this one. And then they're kind of being put on a shelf and not being used. But I'm heat treating these. I'm doing all these things that I know are making slave, but they're being collected as art. And I'm also a hunter, and I'm seeing cheap crap in Cabela's, and I'm like, there has got to be a better knife that we could provide on a production scale that is affordable for someone to buy, that I can put all of my custom knowledge into, the heat treating and all that. And so I always wanted to start Montana Knife Company, and I'm actually going to frame this in our retail store. I have a history section. I mean, I have pamphlets from when I had Montana Knife Company printed on stuff when I was 22, 23 years old. And I registered the name when I was 19, and I wanted to start a hunting knife company for years. And so it's a long story in between. My house burned down. I was living in a camper in my driveway 13 years ago. Absolutely broke as hell. Divorced, 4 kids, living in a camper, burnout house. Like, it was bad. And I rebuilt my house, and then I met that fall my new wife, Jessica. My idea, someday I want to start this knife company, and she was just like, "We'll do it." I'm broke, and I also don't know how to start a custom knife business, like a production knife business. And she figured out, and so in 2019, her dad died and left us about $1, and my wife gave that to me and said, "Go buy the steel that you need to start MKC." And so I did. I bought some sheets of steel, and I used that money to help, pay for getting blades water jet cut and all these different things. I'm making a knife, right? And I was making one knife at a time for $5,000, and now I'm trying to make 200 knives in a batch. And so I was doing everything wrong. And I was doing most of those all like custom wise by hand. And, in 2020 is when I actually launched the website in July. And I met my business partner and brought him on, and he was doing the marketing, and things really started to roll to where it is today. But it's funny what I look at is we're making these hunting knives, and we're doing all this, but then I also have like all these skills that it's hard to get across to people. Like, the reason that we're different and special is no other CEO for any other knife company in America can forge, this knife, right? And they haven't passed the Master Smith test and Journeyman test. And it's kind of hard to find sometimes that balance a little bit of showing people what you can do on the custom side, and why maybe I hear, man, $300. And I'm like, yeah, well, this one's $7,000, but I'm trying to get across to people. You spend hundreds of dollars on your base layers, your outer layers, your rain gear pack, your optics. People set up these long range rifles, and they, all the, buying Swarovski binoculars and all this stuff. $49 knife. And one of the only pieces of gear that you own that you're actually going to pass down to your son someday, gun or your knife. Like, most everything else is going to be outdated or more capable. And as men, over the generations, we've always passed down knives and guns. And then we started buying in China and just throwing away like replaceable blades. And I've sharpened thousands for guys that have brought them into my shop over the last 30 years. And, this was my grandpa's knife. He was in Vietnam, or my uncle, and he was a guide in Alaska, and he passed away, and this is the only thing I have of him. Or my dad carried this knife in his pocket every single day. And it really matters to them who carried it. And when I was seeing guys buying these, I saw this replaceable blade thing come along, and then just knives got cheaper and less and less and less important as a part of your gear. came together for your whitetail hunt or your elk hunt or whatever. And it really bothered me because I was seeing the knife making as a true craft and of something that we're wanting to pass down the knowledge of this forging. So all this product that we're making, and it was being cast aside as kind of like not an important part of your gear, even though if you shoot a deer, the only really up after that is. Sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent.
No, that's incredible. And I think that's really important. And one thing that, I was going back and forth about like trying to figure out if like to add it in or not, because so you talk about like the heirloom knives and things like that. And right when you came on here, I was telling Nate as far as like the heirloom knife thing. And that's one of the big things with Montana Knife Company is I was telling him my dad has this knife. He bought it on his first mule deer hunt in Montana. And he bought two of them, and he bought one to give to my grandfather. And so my grandfather has since passed away, and now my brother has that knife. And it's made by knife maker Rudy Rana.
Yep. That's right out in Bonner, about 25 miles from where I'm sitting. He's a legend.
Yeah. And so I was like, I wonder if Josh knows of him, or if, because you said your mentors and the guys that were around you. So I was like, I was wondering about that. But that was always...
I never got to meet him. He was older by the time I came along, real old, but he really was a legend, and his knives are worth like very valuable today.
But that's one of the things when I was growing up, it was always like looking at that knife with the bone handle and everything. And it's like, your grandpa has one of those too, and these are going to be your knives and all of that. And you're right. Some of that has kind of gone away. And, so with the price point issue, that's the biggest thing, I think. And I actually saw, one of my friends post about it. He's like, oh, these guys are out here posting about these $300 knives. And I think that's why the story is that important. Like you said, like you being a master bladesmith, the CEO of the company, being able to forge these, because in this world, it's so easy today to just start a company, grab a marketing company, push it out there, and, create all of this buzz for these products that are inflated in price just for margin. So as we get down to that heirloom quality, et cetera, let's go to like the steel. So it's Magna Cut, right? So what separates that from, say, the Cabela's or like, the Chinese 420s or the CPM steels or a tool steel?
Yeah. So Magna Cut is a CPM steel. Like the CPM 154 is a really good steel. Like the CPM stuff is good, but when you make steel, there's ingredients, right, in these steels. Like it starts off as a powder. A lot like making cookies starts off with, flour and sugar. And so how much sugar you put in, how much flour you put in, it affects the input. You can adjust those ingredients within that to end up with like a different result depending on what tool you are trying to make at the end, right? So if you're trying to make like something that's going to hold up to like a really, really high impact, like a broadhead or something like that, you're going to adjust those ingredients, but you might give up on the other end, right? It's always a give and take. And so it's really in this perfect balance. For a knife blade, you want toughness, and that's what you really want, like a broadhead or like a spring in your car, right? You want toughness. You want that blade to be able to flex when it's under pressure, but not snap, right? Like with a broadhead, you want to be able to take an impact and not chip or blow apart. But then with a knife, it's interesting because you're also going to have this very, very thin edge on it, and you want it to.
The world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. so you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
Whether you bond over streaming binge-worthy videos, watching sports recaps, video gaming, or by unplugging altogether, the 2026 Lincoln Nautilus Hybrid helps keep you connected throughout your journey. Learn more at Lincoln.com. Available connectivity features and functionality vary by model. Package pricing, trials, and term lengths vary by model. Video streaming and games are only available while parked.
To hold up to wear, be wear resistant. Well, when you want wear resistance, you start to increase that hardness in that edge, but that then reduces toughness. It reduces its ability to flex, right? If you make a spring in your car too hard, then it's going to snap. And so there's this real fine line that you're walking when you're creating these steels. And Magna Cut was created by Larry Thomas. He's a PhD metallurgist. I have a long history actually with his family. I've only met him a couple times, but he wasn't even born yet. That's how old I'm getting. But I shared my very first table at the Eugene, Oregon Knife Show when I was 12 with his dad, Devin Thomas, before Larry was born. He was nice enough. There again, another adult that just slid his knives over. He paid $400 for this table, and he slid his stuff over to half of it and let me put my knives on the other half. And that was Laren's dad before Laren was born. Laren was born, and the next thing you know, he's an adult, and he's a PhD metallurgist. He has this affinity for knife making and the industry. And he knew that knife makers were basically using steels that were repurposed from other things, like car springs or like ball bearings. We were taking steels from industry that pretty much worked well for a knife and used them to make knives. Well, he invented this steel for the knife industry to make knives. That's what Magna Cut is. It's a stainless steel. I am not an expert in full-on all the little tiny properties within the steel. But he did a ton of testing, and he wrote a book called Knife Nerds, and you can read about basically every steel a knife maker has ever used. And he runs scientific tests on that, and he measures toughness, he measures wear resistance, corrosion resistance, all these things. And in Magna Cut what's different about Magna Cut, it's a stainless steel, and generally over time, stainless steels have been known to be less tough. They tend to snap or break easier. Where carbon steel, like a 5200 ball bearing steel, has always been very, very tough, hard to break, holds a good edge, but it rusts, right? And a lot of people that buy, especially when you're selling thousands of production knives, people don't want to take care of their stuff, and they don't want any spots of rust. It gets to be hard for a knife company like ours dealing with, like, talking to a customer about, like, I bought this knife and and now it's got spots on it. It's like, yeah, that's just what happens. Like, who cares? It's called character, but that's not what people want to hear. But he developed this stainless steel that had a much higher toughness than pretty much any other stainless steel had in the industry. And I transitioned over that steel about 2 years into MKC. That's when he launched it. And we were, I want to say the first. I don't know of anyone else that really was, but we were one of the very first companies in our production. And now you see every production knife company using it.
And so with that give and take and that toughness, etc., how does that translate to the field for resharpening, edge retention, etc.?
That's a great question, and I hear so often people are like, sharpening, I'm terrible at sharpening, and it's like, well, you got to make sure that the blade is even built right to lend it to sharpen well. I see people, they drop off for me to sharpen, and it's called edge geometry, right? It's the angle at which the edge comes down to the from the spine of the knife down to the edge, and that angle. And if you have a ton of weight and thickness and you have this big bull nose behind the edge, there's going to be a stone to ever take enough material off to resharp, right? And so, first of all, that's why you'll also see our MKC hunting knives are much thinner than knife you've ever seen on the hunting market. And that much easier to resharpen. Knives being broken is bad PR for the company. I'll tell you right now, I said we were going to have some people break our knives if they have used them. They don't use them right, because I'm going to grind these edges down thin, and it's going to make the user experience for 99% of our customers amazing. They're going to glide through hide and hair and meat and all that stuff. And then when they do get dull, because they will, every knife will, my customers are going to be able to resharpen their knife easier because it's thinner behind the edge. But occasionally I'm going to have a guy trying to take elk ivories out with the tip of the knife, and he's going to use like a screwdriver and break the tip off. And that's why we get 100%. You sit, we'll just deal with that guy, the 1%, for the 99 to have a good experience. Now, how does heat treat and steel come into that? I see steels out there like an S90V. It's harder than hell, right? It's like a diamond. The box, when it's sharp, it'll hold an edge for quite a long time. It'll be very impressive. Once it's dull in the field, like when you're sharpening, you're taking off of your knife. You are grinding that steel on a very fine stone, but you are grinding steel away from the edge, and you are resharpening that knife by taking steel off of your knife. That's why you see an old butcher knife that's half the width that it was when Grandpa bought it. Because over the years, he's been wearing it down, sharpening it. Well, if you can't wear it down, can't take steel off, then you can't get it sharp. So that's one thing. That knife also being so incredibly hard makes it brittle. And so what does the knife company have to do? They have to thicken it up so you don't break it, right? And so now you have a hard and thick knife, and it makes for a very poor user experience. Now, the opposite is true. I'll get knives in, and I'll go to sharpen it, and I can tell on a stone, when I hit it on a stone, it's like I get stuck in mud. The knife has no resistance to the stone. The stone just cuts it like crazy. There's a lot of drag, and I can tell this steel is very, very soft. Well, that's going to mean you're probably never going to break that knife, but you're going to lose your edge incredibly fast. You're not going to get through a deer. If you hit bone or you're chopping with it or something, it's going to dent the edge. And knives are an interesting thing, because you could be like, well, what hardness do you and what edge geometry do you want on a knife? And it's like, what's the knife for? Are you deploying to Afghanistan and going to be prying doors off freaking huts and doing whatever with it? Or are you a chef in New York City and you need a super thin, fine, hard? Or are you an elk hunter and you're going to be, bit of hard work with it, but you also want this fine cutting ability. So you're in between the Afghanistan and the chef, right? And that's where a good knife company understands that we're going to heat treat, we're going to treat our chef's knives different than our hunting knives, and our hunting knives different than our tactical knives. And we're going to walk that fine line for you to try to give you the best blade for the job.
I can relate to all those things you said from like a normal consumer standpoint, like a hunter, right? I bought my first, I would say, I remember my grandpa using the buck knives back in the day, and that thing right now is like got a curve in it like no other from him sharpening it so much. And I remember when I was a kid, I got my first buck knife. My dad bought it for me when I started hunting, and the knife was terrible. It was not a good knife. It was nothing like Grandpa's knife, right? So that knife barely got used. It just sits in a drawer right now because I think it's some of those things you touched on, soft and doesn't hold the edge very well, and those kind of things. So then fast forward a handful of years, try a couple different type of knives, and I bought one of the nicer knives at like a Cabela's, and I really liked that knife. I was just blown away with how long it stayed sharp, how I think I had a tally of like 7 or 8 deer I gutted. And I cut the sternums, go alongside the side of the sternum. I'm pretty abusive with it. And before I had to sharpen it again. And I was just like, this is insane. Cause like you said, we'd be processing deer, and one guy almost has a full-time job of sharpening knives for everyone, kind of a thing. So when I got that knife, it was like, whoa, this is amazing. And then I went to go sharpen it for the first time, and wow, did I struggle. And I still struggle to this day trying to get some of those, more expensive knives sharp, and you start talking about the shape of them, and it's like, oh yeah, that's what that knife looks like, and that's why I struggle with it. And I've bought different sharpeners, and I've tried doing the same style I do with my broadheads, and like trying that, and sometimes it just doesn't really ever get back to the level it was when I got it.
And a lot of people have a lot of success sharpening broadheads, and you know why? Because broadheads are thin.
Yep. Yep.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And two things. One, that's why when you buy an MKC knife, we will sharpen it for free for life. Because I also want, let's say you're a guy that doesn't really sharpen well, really care to learn. Well, I would rather someone send me that knife once or twice a year and let us sharpen it and send it back to them for free, to make sure that clean season, when you're packing your stuff up, you grab that knife, you don't leave it in the drawer. Like, I want people using our stuff. And I had a buddy of mine back in 2020 when I was starting this be like, dude, if you sharpen knives for free, you're going to be spending a fortune someday sharpening knives. How are you going to be able to afford that? And I'm like, well, that means I sold a shitload of knives then, doesn't it? Like, I think I'll be able to afford to do that. And that's where we're at today. Like, we're getting 20 to 30 knives in a day right now to sharpen that we're doing for an hour. That means we have a lot of knives out there. And also, that means those people are going to be so happy with their experience. They're going to come back and buy a lot more knives, and that has also been happening. But one thing I want to say,
telling their friends and family, like, hey man, this knife's awesome. Like how my experience was first when I used that knife. Everyone was like, whoa, what is this? And that shock value helps. And if you're sharpening that many, that means your customers are actually using your stuff, which is pretty cool too.
Yeah. Well, and you kind of put up an earlier point. So you said grandpa's knives all sharpened away and kind of worn out, right? And you still got it in a drawer somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the one that wasn't great, you don't really like, you threw it in.
Yep.
Worn out, even if they're a piece of crap, if they don't really work well, or even if grandpa made to a toothpick and it's really not useful today, you haven't thrown those knives away. And that's the point, is like, someday you're going to probably have a grandson that you may or may not ever meet that's going to be going through grandpa's old drawer of knives and wonder, why is this knife here sharpened down to nothing? And for some reason, he's not going to know why, but that knife's going to mean more to him than the one that's basically unused. You know?
Love it. Love it.
So we'd kind of mentioned, I think prior to the podcast, the differences between a custom knife and these production knives that you've got right now. And you said that sometimes there's a misnomer of these are all hand forged, etc. And you said, custom knives are in a completely different category. So what is the production process that you guys have over there at MKC?
Yeah, I think it maybe before we were on, I really try to be careful about putting up too much forging content, making it look like we are custom every single MKC knife. Like, I have my history and I have my ability around, but I never want to have customers think like, oh, every single knife that MKC makes, Josh hand forged it. It's like, no, that's not true. But getting in an MKC knife is all that experience, the edge geometry, the steel, the heat treat. There is no real difference in quality, in the user experience and all that between like an MKC knife and like my custom knife. If I was to go make a hunting knife tomorrow, I would hope perform exactly like an MKC knife. There's no denigration to the actual process because it's production. I think a lot of times people think, oh, production, it's cheaper, and they don't do something that Josh would do if I just paid him to make a custom knife. Actually, not true at all. The reason we can charge $300 is because we are utilizing machines. We are doing things on a mass scale, right? I am paying employees to be able to help us do all that stuff. And so we're able to make knives for $300, where if you ask me to make that as a custom knife, a custom maker is going to need $700 or $800 or more. And that's, I hate to say it, but the knife makers are horrible businessmen. And they think they're like, I made a knife for $300 and it took me 8 hours, $6 an hour. Well, are you including your health insurance in that? Are you including your business insurance in that? Are you including all your materials, your consumables, like all your things? And if you start to walk that through with custom knife makers, and it's like, dude, you charge $300, but you should have charged $600. Did you put anything away in a 401k for yourself? Well, you'll be able to retire someday. So that's with the custom knives, the real difference is you're truly getting the heart and the soul of that maker. And you'll see me share custom knife makers' knives on my Instagram because I am still a giant custom knife industry, and I have huge respect. Guy that's raising a family and he's making knives in his back lean-to and trying to make a living at it. And he's making one knife at a time. It's very difficult. And the reason that you buy those knives are truly wanting to support that person. And I say that about knife shows. When they go to the Atlanta Blade Show and there's 1,000 exhibitors and a guy walks around, he doesn't buy this knife because it's this knife right here. He doesn't buy the knife. Very rarely have I ever had someone walk up, just look down at my table and say, I'll buy that. I don't care how much it is. Right? It starts with a conversation and, you find some common ground on where you're from and you start on your kids and coaching sports. And the next thing you know, the guy likes you.
I have created the most advanced AI soldier.
The wait is over. Tron Ares now streaming on Disney+.
We are looking for something you've discovered. And some of us will stop at nothing to get it.
Ready? The countdown is complete.
There's no going back.
Our directive is clear.
Hang on!
Tron Ares now streaming on Disney+. Rated PG-13.
Instagram teen accounts have automatic protections for what teens see and who can contact them, plus time management tools. And Instagram will continue adding built-in safety features to help create age-appropriate experiences. Learn more about teen accounts and Instagram's ongoing work to protect teens online at instagram.com/teen accounts.
And then he starts looking at your knives and he buys it. Well, he has bought you, the person. And I say that about custom artists. Like you start talking about, like, there's this painter and he's this super eclectic, weird guy and he's super cool to talk to and he does these really neat paintings, and you're buying into the person. And so that's why I say, like, there's something special about one guy sat there and handcrafted a knife for your son or for your wife or whatever. But not everyone can afford that. And that's where MPC comes in, right? If you don't want to spend $1,000 on your 12-year-old's birthday, which most of us probably don't, I would argue a $200 or a $300 knife is much easier to actually choke down, knowing you're giving your son or your daughter or your wife something that really is cool. And people say, like, oh, that's so expensive. And it's like, dude, I watch people spend that at the bar on a weekend. Like, you're buying something that is going to be, like you were talking about your grandpa, sharpened out to nothing and being handed grandson someday. Like, it's like, I look at, like, our chef's knives, $1,000 set. That's a lot of money. You're going to use those chef's knives every single day of your life, the rest of your life in your kitchen. And most likely, those things are going to get passed down and be being used even more. Really, per use, it's dirt cheap. You're going to buy $1,000 cell phone and throw it away in 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, so you have a whitetail knife coming out specifically for whitetail. If you go on the site, there's a bunch of different knives, a bunch of different blade geometries. And I feel like I always gravitate towards, like, the shape of, like, a bird and trout knife. I think that I don't know if that's just what I like or that's, like, what feel best in my hand, but what makes, like, a whitetail knife versus a skinning knife or a bird and trout knife, for example?
Well, I would say that's actually super, super hard to answer because everybody has an opinion, right? And so, and no one's wrong. And that's why you end up as a knife company making a lot of different shapes, because I can make a whitetail knife and someone will say, well, he's out knife for my whitetail. Like, well, for whatever reasons that you like that, that's the knife that you should buy and use for that. I generally don't like a big knife. Like that whitetail knife, I think is as big a knife as you need, frankly, for any animal. When I started Montana Knife Company, I could only afford to make one. And so to get for one model. And so I actually made the Blackfoot knife. And that's our first knife, and it's still actually my favorite knife. My whitetail's probably my second favorite, but I made that Blackfoot knife because I grew up in the Blackfoot River Valley, didn't grow up with much money, but I could ride my bike from my house and go grouse hunting. I could go deer hunting. I could drive 10 minutes up in the mountains and go elk hunting. You could moose hunt. I could go walk down from my parents' house and go fishing. And that knife will do all of it. It's got enough of a tip on it that I can keep out a buck if I shoot a buck. I can, rest out a grouse, or I can break down a moose with it. Or the local use it and bust bass strings. My dad can clean out grease zerks in his backhoe with it and get the rocks out of it. Like, doing with that knife. And so I made the Blackfoot knife for the Blackfoot River Valley and everything that you can possibly do within that valley. The whitetail knife is just a little bit bigger and it has a little bit more belly. You see a lot of guys, shoot a whitetail, they'll throw it in the truck or they'll grab it with a tractor and they'll hang it up and they're hanging in their garage. And it has a little bit more of a skinny, a little bit more belly. And I notice a lot of whitetail hunters, it's really funny. So many guys, I've shown the Blackfoot knife now, well, we're a little bigger knife. I have a bigger hand. So that knife has a little bit bigger, a lot of white, big boys in the Midwest, and they have a big old hand on them, and they don't like the Blackfoot knife because it doesn't quite fit their hand. Well, it's weird to put a big handle on a tiny blade. So the blade naturally gets a little bit bigger, a little bit of belly. And again, that's why I've got like a Stolo knife with a lot more belly. We've got a Super Cub for a big knife that I want for I want a 5-inch blade for hunting. Bourbon trout knives, fillet knives. So at the end of the day, it's what the customer wants to use it for. Because I find all the time I make knives for. We have a knife with no tip on it for cowboys. With it's called the Stockyard. It's for like, if you got bail string caught up in a calf and you want to cut it loose, and he's kicking and he kicks the knife, it's not going to stab him, right? Or if you want to, team roping in the rodeo arena and your horse gets hung up in his rope and you got to cut it loose because that steer's wrapped around your horse, you're not going to jab your. Well, I have guys out dressing out whitetails with it, and I'm like, didn't have a tip. But they're like, oh, I like it because I'm not going to stab the guts. I'm like, okay. It's all in me for.
Yeah.
I feel personally attacked about being the big guy, the big Midwest guy, because I do have some big paws. So that's one of the things I do always look at is the handle size, just from I don't like poking myself, so I think that's one thing. So that's pretty funny that we all do like a certain type of knife. I think even between me and my dad, like what he likes and what I like are a little different too. So that's pretty.
Well, and makes it fun. I tell people when they go like to Alaska on a moose hunt or whatever, I'm like, you only need one knife. But I'm a knife maker. I have knives, right? I'll take a couple knives. I'll take a small little speed goat that I carry on either on my bottom harness or on my pack strap for opening up snacks and for, whatever, right? Just little things, and it's always there and it's handy. But then I'll have maybe a Stonewall or a little bigger blade in my pack for if I do get knocked down a moose and we're skinning, I've got a bigger blade that I can do a lot of work with or, get more aggressive with it. But then I still have that mini goat or that speed goat or whatever for detail work around the eyes and the tear ducts and stuff when you're caping it out. So
nice.
Sometimes the answer is a couple blades, especially if you're on a 10-day hunt, 2,000 miles from home, and prepared is nice. But again, weight is a big consideration, which is why I try to keep all of our knives as light as possible.
That was one. You kind of led me into one of the questions I wanted to ask you was about the everyday carry knife. I mean, I love having a knife in my pocket always. Like, I think the peer pressure of my dad absolutely ridiculing me if I don't have a knife on me, right, growing up. And looking at, talking about the speed goat and the mini goat, how do you like to carry those knives every day? Like the vinyl harness thing makes complete sense when you're hunting, but like, what do you see guys doing, and what do you recommend? Because that's one of the things I'm looking at. Like, I would like to upgrade the knife that I do carry every day, because doing construction, like you said, I'm opening up feed bags one day for the hobby farm. I could be, wedging that thing somewhere to try to pry something out on the job site, frozen this in the wintertime, summertime full of mud, like a lot of those things. So what's kind of your point on some everyday carry stuff?
Yeah, so this gets into two things. One, we've been a fixed blade hunting knife company, and it's actually been amazing how many of carrying a little mini goat or a jackstone, the dirty jobs got on that knife, and carrying that. And it sounds funny, but until you try it, like I would have never thought that in a sheath with a pocket clip on it, and where you have a fixed blade and a little bit of handle hanging out of your pocket, that you can grab that knife, you pull it out and it's deployed. And you're not getting a bunch of junk in it and clean it up like you will a folding knife. And it's actually been really cool carrying a fixed blade in my front pocket. And I've been doing that now for the last several years. Today, I'm carrying a folder in my pocket because I'm actually testing our new folder that we're launching, hopefully and I'm trying to put it through all the paces. I'm purposely getting as dirty as I can and just testing out the locking functions and the mechanics of it when it gets dirt and shit in it, right? And so we are coming out with a folding knife. It's funny, if I'm asked once, I'm asked 100 times a week when we're coming out with a folder. We actually just launched a knife last week called the Castle Rock, and we actually did a little series of these small fixed blade pocket knives that are a robust little blade that you can do about anything with, that you can carry in your front pocket. And people are carrying those like crazy, and it's pretty. That being said, we are coming out with a folder sitting.
Well, so now I have to ask a little bit about the folder. Are we looking at a liner lock, a frame lock, a slip joint? What are we?
I'd love, but we're trying to kind of get, it's funny, in the past, we've purposely let little things slip and whatnot, like these people with stuff on our other knives, but to really, really keep kind of under wraps until, we have a lot of competition that's wanting to know. So, I would say keep an eye out. In about 2.5 weeks, we're going to kind of do a big launch announcement on that, 2 or 3 weeks. So I hate to be that way, but it feels douchey. But I promised my business partner because I wouldn't ruin this.
Sounds like I need 3 knives. I'm going to need a pocket knife, folder, a little carry knife, and a bigger hunt knife. So I'm going to be spending some money here in the next few months, is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's we're very excited about it. It's a whole nother process. And I mean, that's the whole, I've actually been frustrated. It's really hard to actually tell the story of how cool what we've been doing is, as far as I started that in my garage 20, my high school kids and junior high kids. I mean, my daughter was a 5th grader and she was bead blasting blades for us. They were truly helping me. I had no employees. I was a lineman for Northwestern Energy working on power lines. And we started that in my garage. And then we built a shop in my horse pasture behind that garage. And we started bringing in processes in-house. Because when you just start shop, I didn't have CNC machines. I didn't have any engineering machinists or any of that. And I just started attacking each while we started to gain popularity. Then you have these conglomerates come out trying to buy you. And I wanted to show, because everyone told me it was impossible to compete with a hunting knife company. No one's going to buy a $300 hunting knife. They're $49 at Walmart. And I was like, I think there's enough Americans that will will appreciate an American-made product, that they could just believe that. And no other knife company, the big knife companies out there, I thought, were actually hunters. They're based in Portland, and they're trying to sell their shit in REI. They're not hunters. We're hunters. I felt like we could resonate with the hunting world, because we are the customers of our own product, right? And we started building that, and then we just moved into this new building. We just built this 51,000 square foot building. It's still just Brandon and I that own the company. We haven't sold to the conglomerates. We are setting up right now the last of 2 processes that will mean we'll be able to make a knife from laser cut all the way to shipping it out with a t-shirt or a hat out of the same building without leaving the building.
That's cool.
We just spent in the last 12 months $17 million in the state of Montana building this building. We've got 110 employees now. My employee was a kid that would come out after high school, after class in 2021. He was a senior at Hellgate High School. He's now managing like 4 downstairs. It's just the coolest story. And we have this Black Rifle coffee shop now. So you can come into our facility and sit there and have coffee and look through the windows and see all the employees, the processes. We're going to give people tours. And I want this, like, you don't have to sell out to the conglomerate. You don't have to do any of that stuff. Like, you can just take the dollars that you earn and put them back into the company and just keep building it, and that's what we've done. And it's from the support of, but it's hard to really show people, and I'm biased, but like, it really is cool what we've been able. It's because frankly, it's the hunting industry that supported it. Down the road, 5-7 years from now, we might be knowing more, and our revenue might be more from folding knives. What, 2 or 3% of Americans have a hunting license, right? But millions more Americans will buy a pocket knife or a folding knife or a chef's knife. But I've always said, like, we're a hunt knife company first. Even down the road, if we sell more in revenue in pocket knives, like, we're a hunting knife company. Like, we're a Montana knife company, and that's who we are. Where go find a grip and grin of a dead animal on Instagram ditch. You're not gonna,
Yeah, we can get behind that.
No, I think the story is amazing, and I really appreciate you coming on and kind of elaborating, because like I said, I mean, Nate's a testament to it. Like, I think the whole thing was missed in some of the marketing, at least to us as whitetail hunters. And like I say, the story is just amazing, and the craftsmanship and everything behind it. And like I said, in today's day and age where anybody can have a company and just come out with a product that seems, this is just, they're just trying to make money. It's just another product. I think the backstory is more important, or as important as the product itself. So, thanks for coming on. Anything else that we've missed, or anything else that you want to come out? Anything else you want to tell us about that folder? I mean, before we let you off.
No, I see you got that is Spartan 4 chat behind you.
Yeah. Yep.
There's another started a company, Bill Thompson. I mean, super genius. Another example of like a guy that gets out of the military, starts a company and is building something really cool and struggling through growth. It's I don't know. I really appreciate the support of Americans, and it is frustrating. Like, people look at all of a sudden as this big brand, like this, you mentioned it, like this Yeti style, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm like I'm this person, like, still cleaning floors and hanging shit up around here, and like doing the thing that's myself, right? And we have a lot of really, really great help. I'm not saying I'm doing all by myself, but I'm just saying, like, I still consider infancy. Like, we finally just moved out of my horse pasture a month ago. Like, we were on a dead end road at my house until a month ago. And people are like, oh, this big, huge company, and they're making all this money or whatever. And it's like, dude, you have no idea. We're putting all this money back into trying to build this to where we can do everything under our own roof and control the process from start to finish. And then when you have I mean, I have an $850,000 a month payroll, right? Like, people think like, oh, you're making millions of dollars. Trying to compensate our employees really well. We pay paid vacation benefits. Like, I am very proud of the fact that in small rural Montana, we can grow a big national brand like this. And it's getting big, but also still feels really small because it's still just everyday people we're hiring, and then we're building skills within these kids. So many of these kids graduate around here, maybe did or didn't go to college. And they're trying to figure out how to stay in Montana. It's gotten very expensive. And there has to be good jobs to be able to stay here and buy a home. And we've got 3 lumber mills that have gone out of business in the last number of years here. A paper mill. Like, we're losing industry in this country. And we're losing those kinds of jobs. Our logging industry's basically been decimated. And there's all these blue-collar guys to go work. And they don't want to go work at a gas station or a freaking Applebee's. And they get to come here and they get to become a machinist knife 1. And 5 years from now, they're going to be full-fledged machinists and have a skill and a career. And that, when you build American manufacturing in this country, and whether it's in small town Ohio, Louisiana, or Montana, we need American manufacturing. And MKC is an example of what that can mean to a community when you build that in a small rural community. It's freaking awesome. But no, I don't have anything else to add. I'm probably rambling out, but
no, I mean, like I said, I appreciate it because it is, whatever the ramble is, it's from the heart. I mean, you can tell that it means a lot to you, what you're doing, and it's not, it's not, PR speak,
Yeah,
would you say?
Absolutely. I would say for me, like, hearing you talk, I mean, huge inspiration. Being a guy that's never been an employee for anyone, always been self-employed, and you're trying to do this niche thing in a space can be kind of difficult, right? Like building custom homes and doing these things, and that's the lifestyle I grew up in. And then you get to the point now where it's really easy to access a lot of information about a lot of different companies. And hearing your story and understanding what that entails, that kind of gets me fired up to like that can happen, right? You always hear the default response typically is, well, it's just impossible to do all that in the States because of this, and this. And then hear a guy like you starting the way you did and what you've been able to grind out and turn it into. It's like, hey, if I'm looking at a couple different things here, where do I want to invest my money? Let's I think a lot of guys can get behind that. Let's invest it with companies that want to improve the area they live, improve the life of their workers. That means a lot. Like, I have guys that work for me in no way, shape, or form as many as what you have, but the pride that comes in all of us doing something to better each other and pay mortgages and do all those things is pretty amazing. So that trickle effect that you guys are doing is going to have a huge ripple, much like that mentorship thing we talked about earlier. So got me fired up, man. It's making me want to keep doing what I'm doing and staying up late and doing all those things that you do just to see where it can lead. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, thank you very much. And kind of cool. I feel like my knife 101 knowledge has increased quite a bit after today. So that's a lot of fun for me.
And guys like you that are, self-employed, building America, building homes for people to raise their families in. I grew up in the excavation world, and that's why my dad just could not believe I quit my lineman job to start this company when it was January 1st of 21. He's never had a paid vacation or a benefit in his life, and he's self-employed, and quit that job is making $100,000 a year with paid vacation and benefits. And I called my dad, and I'm like, well, I quit. I'm gonna go after this MKC business. It seems to be starting to take off. And quit? He's just like, how could you do that? You starved as an acre for 10 years, and you have this great lineman job, and now you quit. But there's a respect for the blue collar people who don't have paid vacation, don't have benefits, and they're out swinging a hammer. And if you fall off a wall and break your back, like, how's your family going to make it? Like, there's pressure and weight on someone's shoulders in that way. And really do respect what you do and what so many of our customers do. And then they turn around and $100 on that. I take that really, really serious, you know. And also, as a knife company, like, it's why it drives me so crazy when we do get hate from like the hunt world. And I have to stay off the internet, not read some because like, yeah, we're like the only hunting knife, like a big knife company out there that like truly identifies as a hunting knife company. We almost gave $1 million, close to $1 million away last year in conservation. You go to our website, you see Wild Sheep Foundation t-shirts, Ducks Unlimited, Rocky Mountain Elk. From all those go to those organizations. Like, we are a hunting knife company. Dan, that $300 or whatever people are paying for a knife is not an insignificant amount of money to people who are barely making it. But those dollars are coming back into the community. And I do think when people see what we're doing and truly actually know who we are, they understand that support is coming back to hunters. And frankly, like with how we, supported like the Colorado Wolf Management Project last year and whatnot with the wolf stuff and whatnot, we have to support companies in the hunt industry that are willing to take a stand and help preserve, whether it's access, habitat, or fight off this legislation BS. Because maybe you're just a whitetail hunter in Ohio and you don't really care about a wolf in Utah, but you should. Like, we should all care about, losing hunting in Seattle, in Washington. We should all care about all of these rights as hunters, because they're eventually coming for all their rights, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Well, I really appreciate it. And so the website is probably where everybody can find this. And you guys, how often do you have new knives dropping on the website?
Yeah, we have them every Thursday night. We have, whether it's a new one or one that we're bringing back, usually it's relatively new if it's on a Thursday. Saturdays is kind of a restock of stuff. But yeah, come to the website. It's mkc.com. And if you see a knife you want and we're out of stock on it, it's a thing people don't really understand. It's like it's hard to stay in stock and everything. But if you see it and you want it but it's not there, then you sign up for our email list. Like, when it comes back into stock. And we're trying to get more and more in stock on knives. But again, it's kind of this fine line. You got to balance cash and inventory. And I'm trying to, because we have a big conglomerate money behind us. So if we make a big gamble and it doesn't work out, we don't want to cost ourselves what we're building here.
And the new facility, you're building kind of like a destination. So if people are headed that way, where is the new facility that they can come check out?
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's right outside on the west side of Missoula, at the Y here. It's kind of the exit you take to go to Glacier Park if you're on Interstate 90. You'll see we have a parking up. I mean, you can't miss it at the exit here. You can see that flag for miles. And we have a Black Rifle coffee shop that we put in it. You can come in and sit down and have coffee and, take a pee break on your trip and, see deer and all that stuff, muskox, and check out the knives, take a tour. It's a pretty cool spot. There's not a lot of factory that you buy that you can go to the factory and walk around it. But that's what we want people, we call it built in public. We want people to see what we're doing. There's no secret in it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the time, Josh.
Yeah, thank you guys. I really appreciate it.